The summit of South American presidents concluded in Brazil with a call for integration of all countries in the region. And the U.S. House of Representatives is expected to hold a final vote on the debt ceiling bill ahead of the June 5th deadline. A Pakistani court extended bail in 7 separate cases to the former Prime Minister Imran Khan for another 10 days. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The summit of South American heads of state closed on Tuesday in Brasilia with an unanimous call for regional union expressed in the Brasilia Consensus, the final declaration of the meeting. At this summit, it was decided to establish a contact group headed by the foreign ministers to evaluate the experiences of the South American integration mechanisms and the elaboration of a roadmap for the integration of South America. The leaders addressed regional issues such as climate crisis, threats to international peace and security, pressures on food and energy chains, risks of new pandemics, increasing social inequalities, and threats to institutional democratic stability. They also agreed on the need to strengthen democracy, promote economic and social development, combat poverty, hunger, and inequalities, as well as to promote gender equality and the orderly and safe management of migration. And after his closing speech for the summit of Latin American presidents, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva offered a press conference where he answered several questions from the local and international press. In one of his responses, President Lula reaffirmed his position of respecting the sovereignty of all countries and the decisions determined by each state within this framework.
I have always defended the idea that every country has its own sovereignty, and it can decide his regime, the political regime, and it can decide what type of election it's going to have, and when they're just going to discuss the issues of the government. It's very important that people should be aware of that. The democratic world demands Venezuela, but does not demand the same from Saudi Arabia. It's rare that. What I'm defending right now is that every country has its own sovereignty in its decision, in making some decision. I want that Brazil's decision will be respected, especially the decisions that the people participate. And what I want for Venezuela is the same that I want for Brazil and for all the countries.
When asked about the protection of the Amazon, President Lula da Silva referred to the main topics to be discussed during the Amazon Summit, which will take place in Brazil in August 2023.
Therefore, what we're going to do is to do a meeting in August to know what the president of the Amazon region believes. We have to know what everyone thinks. We have to know what is the process of occupation of this process right now. How the Indians are living right now. How do they treat the ones who shred wood? How they treat all the environment, dead burns, the water of the Amazons. All of that is going to be discussed in the meeting. To know how our soil is, how is our country, how to know how is the country of the other in order to make decisions.
The president of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, called for streamlining the functioning of UNASUR and learning from mistakes so as not to divide the region.
I share everything Lula has said about making the functioning of UNASUR more efficient. Obviously, the system must change, and decisions must be taken more by majorities than by consensus, which sometimes makes everything more difficult, and leaves consensus for extreme situations. Let us learn from our mistakes. It did us no good to be so divided, and the world found us divided at its worst moment, and showing its worst face, the pandemic, may not find us disunited again.
Also, the Argentine President Alberto Fernandez assured that regional unity should be a state policy of each of the countries of South America.
I want to encourage us to change. I want to ask you that beyond the fact that presidential mandates are short, we understand that regional unity must be a state policy in each of our countries, and that it must begin because our children understand the importance of regional unity.
Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro Moros and Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva signed strategic agreements in Brasilia on Monday for the development of both nations. A memorandum of understanding of the agri-food industry was signed at the Itamaraty Palace on Tuesday, motivated by the political will to explore opportunities and deepen exchanges in the areas of agriculture, livestock, sovereignty, and food and nutritional security. This partnership will promote the development and implementation of technical cooperation through joint programs, projects, and activities in the areas of agriculture at all scales, livestock and food sovereignty and security. On the other hand, a memorandum of understanding for the establishment of the supervision and the follow-up mechanism of the Brazil-Venezuela bilateral cooperation program was also signed. The agreement followed the importance of promoting South-South technical cooperation based on the exchange of knowledge and experiences to face similar socio-economic development changes. And Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro Moros and his Argentinian counterpart Alberto Fernandez met on Tuesday in Brazil in the sidelines of the gathering of South American nations to analyze the status of bilateral relations and the cooperation between the two countries. The meeting took place during the summit of South American leaders, which seeks to promote integration in the region in different areas. The two leaders spoke for the first time since the Argentinian head of state assumed the presidency on December 10, 2019. Fernandez was accompanied by his ministers of Foreign Affairs, the International Trade and Worship, Santiago Cafiero, and other authorities. On the other hand, the President Maduro was joined by his Foreign Minister, Iván Gil, and the Deputy to the National Assembly, Nicolás Maduro Guerra. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Wednesday, the U.S. House is expected to hold a final vote on the debt ceiling bill ahead of the June 5th deadline. The compromise bill, convened by the U.S. President Joe Biden and the U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, formally named the Fiscal Responsibility Act, will raise the debt ceiling until 2025, allowing the U.S. to avoid a default that could re-up devastating consequences on its economy. The Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, has warned that the federal government will be unable to pay its bills starting on June 5th, unless the Congress takes action. In addition to the debt ceiling increase, the bill includes government spending cuts and expanded work requirements demanded by McCarthy. The final vote in the Rules Committee was 7-6 to advance the bill, with 4 Democrats joining Roy and Norman in opposing the measure. If the bill passes the House, it will move on to the Senate, where lawmakers will have only a few days to approve the proposal before the 5th June default deadline. And in the United States, one person has been reported dead and 5 wounded in a new shooting in South Carolina as gun violence continues throughout the country. According to local authorities, the deceased was found inside a vehicle while the wounded were taken to a hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Police forces pointed out that so far no detailed description of a suspect is available. This incident is the second shooting reported during the Memorial Day holiday after at least 9 people were injured following a shooting in South Florida's Hollywood Beach on Monday. In Serbia, President Aleksandar Vučić denounced the deployment of NATO troops to the north of the province of Kosovo after holding a meeting with representatives of Western countries to discuss the situation in the region. NATO forces in the province increased their presence in 4 municipalities in northern Kosovo under the pretext of reducing the risk of escalation. For its part, the Serbian president denounced the unilateral actions of the separatist government of Kosovo, affirming that they lead to the violence against the Serbian community. In this regard, the Serbian officials pointed to Pristina for imposing local officials aligned with their anti-Serbian policies.
I want to express our demands from yesterday, that all Kosovo Special Police Forces withdrawn from the Serb-majority municipalities, and that the newly elected fake Kosovo Albanian mayors do not come to the municipalities in northern Kosovo. I have to say that our position and demands have not changed today.
In the meantime, the president of Serbia, Aleksandar Vučić, held a meeting with the ambassadors of the Western countries in Belgrade in view of the clashes in Kosovo. At the meeting with the ambassadors of the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Italy, the Serbian president also met with the head of the permanent delegation of the European Union in Serbia to discuss the worsening situation in Kosovo. In the meetings, Vučić emphasized that the urgent withdrawal of the fake mayors and the so-called special forces of the Pristina police is a condition for maintaining peace in the province of Kosovo and Metohija. Now we move on to other topics. On Tuesday, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, has set out 5 basic principles for protecting the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. In order to prevent a nuclear accident that will endanger the local and regional population, the highest international authority in the field says it is essential to implement a ban on bombing to and from the plant. He also mentioned that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant must not be used as a storage or base for heavy weapons, such as multiple rocket launchers, artillery systems, ammunition, or tanks. In addition, military personnel should not be used to carry out aggressions from the plant. Moreover, he pointed out that the electricity supply outside the nuclear power plant should not be put at risk.
5 principles that must be observed in order to avoid a nuclear accident at this moment of increased military activity around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I had very clear expressions of support about it, and as a result of this, we are going to be reinforcing the presence of the agency through our mission, our permanent mission deployed in Zaporizhzhia, and we will be also looking at the important elements included in these principles that refer to the necessity to avoid attacks from or to the plant. They include the necessity to avoid militarizing the facility, and when I say militarizing, what we have in mind is that the plant becomes a place where military heavy equipment is present, deployed, or stored. We are also talking about the necessity to ensure the continued external power supply. So we are talking about importantly the necessity to protect the safety systems of the plant, and we say it very clearly: avoid acts of sabotage at the plant. And lastly, of course, that this should be upheld by all. So this is why I say that without getting into unwarranted, naive optimism, that today is a day where, Ignacio, together, we have taken a step in the right direction.
And TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StoreSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. A Pakistani court on Wednesday extended bail to former Prime Minister Imran Khan in 7 separate cases for another 10 days. A 2-member bench of the Islamabad High Court directed Khan to appear before relevant courts within the next 10 days and barred the police from arresting him during said period. The court also extended his bail in the Al-Qadir Trust case for 3 days. The former premier, along with his wife Bushra Bibi, came before the National Accountability Bureau in over 200 million corruption case, commonly known as the Al-Qadir Trust case. Khan, the country's only prime minister who was ousted throughout a no-trust vote in Pakistan's 75-year political history, is facing a slew of cases against him ranging from terrorism to attempted murder and to money laundering. On Tuesday, Libya's foreign ministry condemned an attack on its embassy in the Sudanese capital Khartoum, whose buildings were ransacked and looted. Expressing its deep regret and displeasure at such acts, the Libyan ministry called on the parties to the conflict in Sudan to reject violence and to protect diplomatic representations in the spirit of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, which stipulates the obligation to protect embassies and diplomatic missions. In its statements, Libya stressed its attachment to the stability of Sudan and its people, but reiterated its condemnation of the attacks on the headquarters of diplomatic missions in the Sudanese capital. Last Thursday, the Libyan ministry deplored an attack on the offices of the Libyan military attaché in Khartoum, calling for those responsible for this criminal act to be identified and prosecuted. And Uganda's president has signed into law anti-gay legislation supported by many in this East African country, but widely condemned by the right activists and others abroad. The United Nations Human Rights Office said it was appalled by the draconian and discriminatory anti-gay bill that is now passed into law, UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said on Tuesday.
For human rights Volker Turk has recently expressed his concern about worsening of laws criminalizing lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people around the world, including in Uganda. He said these laws violate human rights and they lead to violence and they drive people against one another. The Secretary General has been very clear and continues to call on all member states to uphold the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in particular the adherence to the fundamental rights and principles of non-discrimination and respect for personal privacy. He again calls on all countries to decriminalize or consensual same-sex relationships and transgender people everywhere. I mean, to put it clearly, no one should be penalized, jailed, criminalized for whom they love.
On Tuesday, the president, Faustin Archange Touadéra, on the Central Republic, said that he will call a referendum on a new constitution that will allow him to seek a new term. Faustin made the announcement in an address to the nation posted on Facebook without saying when the vote will take place. Touadéra's opponents have already accused him of seeking to extend his rule despite constitutional limits in one of the world's poorest and most unstable countries. Touadéra was elected in 2016 and was returned to a second term in 2020 despite widespread accusations of electoral flaws. In October, he removed the country's top judge, Danielle Darlan, in what critics denounce as a constitutional coup d'etat after she proposed or opposed the presidential decrees aimed at revising the constitution.
The organization of a constitutional referendum under the conditions required by the Constitution cannot be validly analyzed as a desire on the part of the President of the Republic to prevent political alternation, the guarantee of democracy, and the rule of law. Alternation will always be organized if the new constitution is adopted through free, democratic, and transparent elections open to all citizens. In the coming days, you will be briefed on the main reforms proposed.
China on Tuesday launched the Zhenzhou 16-man spaceship, sending 3 astronauts in the space station combination for a 5-month mission. The spaceship, atop a Long March 2F carry rocket, blasted off from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in northwest China. The Zhenzhou 16 astronauts will conduct large-scale in-orbit tests and experiments in various fields as planned. They are expected to make high-level scientific achievements in the study of novel quantum phenomena, high-precision space-time frequency systems, the verification of general relativity, and the origin of life. We have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.